I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of Strictly Stalking,
a weekly true crime podcast exploring true stalking stories from survivors in their own words.
We cover unique stalking cases through interviews with stalking survivors, advocates, and experts.
Strictly Stalking has been praised by survivors, advocates, listeners, and media for raising awareness about the dangerously underreported and often fatal crime of stalking.
Our series continues to provide a vital platform for stalking survivors to share their stories.
And provides anti-stalking resources for listeners along with important tips on how friends, family, and law enforcement can support stalking survivors.
Please listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this episode of The Cult Vault. I'm your speaker Casey, and today I'm chatting with Alex, a survivor of Maple Lake Academy for Boys, as well as other programs named Aspiro and Milestones. This is very prevalent subject matter given Utah's decision to leave Maple Lake Academy open, even after the death of a young resident who was denied medical care in the girls' school until it was too late. Medical neglect is just one of the common abuses spoken about by those who have lived through one of these traumatic programs. Don't forget, you can access an entire backlog of exclusive episodes by joining my Patreon from as little as £1 a month at patreon.com/The Cult Vault. And CrimeCon tickets for Glasgow on September 10th are still on sale at crimecon.co.uk. You can save 10% at the checkout by entering the code CULT. We will even be getting together for an evening quiz, drinks and pizza. But for now, talking about his experiences across various troubled teen programs, here is Alex. So hello, Alex, and welcome to the show. And here we are, finally able to have this conversation. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Yeah. My name is Alex Watson. I'm currently living in Idaho, and I'm going to be talking about a few programs that I've been through that have changed my life for the positive and the negative.
And we're going to be diving back into the troubled teen industry today, which is something that's been covered extensively on the show, but you have a few different programs as well as one that is familiar to listeners of the show. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was life like before your first program? Because a lot of the things we talk about on this show, groups and movements that people are born into, but of course the troubled teen industry is something that people are usually forced into later on in life.
I would say that my childhood was pretty chaotic. I was adopted from a Ukrainian orphanage at around 2 years old. And so there's a lot of trauma there that was early undiagnosed trauma. And then I was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, which for those that don't know, your pituitary gland, which controls decision-making, is smaller than the average human being, which makes it harder for me to make the proper choice given multiple situations. Does that make sense?
Wow, yeah, that does. I don't know if I've ever spoken to anybody in person that's been diagnosed with that condition. So was this all linked to the reasons why you were adopted at age 2?
No. What I'm saying is, and then that made my childhood pretty difficult. And then I think when I hit about 16 was when stuff started becoming dangerous. I was smoking a lot of marijuana, doing illicit substances. I was running away from home, stealing, just all kinds of bad stuff. And I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to be glorifying that or anything like that. But I just want to kind of inform the public of everything that was going on leading to this, so that I'm not just basically crap talking the programs that I've been to, because there were really good times in every place I've been. There's definite good parts and there are definitely bad parts of treatment, and I've definitely gained a lot of insight and a lot of personal respect that I didn't have beforehand, which is nice.
I think it's really insightful as well that you're able to share with us that it wasn't all negative experiences and that there were some positives, because we don't always hear that when we speak to people that have had these experiences. Of course, it might not be the case for people that they have had positive experiences, but it shows that you've done quite a lot of reflection on the experiences that you've had in these programs that we're going to be discussing today. And you've mentioned as well that, you know, you had difficulty in your life leading up to the point where you were put into these programs, sometimes people aren't sure why they were sent there in the first place, but you've given us a little bit of insight into why your family might have thought that you had some troubling behaviors.
I was just completely oppositionally defiant. Like I wouldn't do anything they'd say. And as a child growing up in programs, I really learned that is very important to a healthy relationship with your family, is to have that boundary there so that your parents can keep you safe.
Absolutely. It's a natural part of brain development to push boundaries and try to work out where it is that you're safe and how much you can get away with. And risk-taking behavior is all part of the kind of adolescent stages of brain development, which is really interesting. And we hear that a lot as a pretty much unanimous theme across the episodes where we do cover the troubled teen industry. And so you were 16 when you entered your first program?
I was either 16 or 17. I can't remember. I think I was 16, yes.
Okay. And how did your family find out about this first program that you were enrolled into?
So I was in, I want to say, my sophomore year of high school, and I was doing a lot of drugs and just bad stuff. And they really needed to find a way to help me, where even if the place they sent me first, which was Aspiro, which is a wilderness program in Utah, was pretty amazing. And I learned a lot. But basically, they got a education consultant, and then that person referred them to Aspiro.
Do you know if they did any kind of research or look into anything around Aspiro, or just did they take their kind of education consultant's word for it and start to get you enrolled into the program?
Well, to my knowledge, they did extensive research for probably about 4 or 5 months beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And their first ditch effort was to send me to a place called Fusion, which was a one-on-one learning school where you could basically just knock out your diploma and then they could send you out on your way. But I made that very difficult. I started dating someone who was younger than me, and I got in a lot of trouble there and was fornicating on the premises, all kinds of nasty stuff. So I got kicked out of there. And then that was when my parents decided that they were going to put me into the troubled teen industry.
Right. Okay. And even with their due diligence and research, you went to Aspiro, and you've said that it was a pretty positive experience. You learned a lot of life skills there. It wasn't all bad.
Yeah. The main one that I'm going to be talking about that was negative is the next place I would sent, which is Maple Lake Academy. That one, and then I got sent to one after Maple Lake Academy, which wasn't great. And now I'm at this amazing trade school where I'm learning auto mechanic skills and all kinds of valuable stuff. So that's pretty much where this is going to go.
Right. Okay. So tell us what Aspiro was like. How did you arrive there? What were your first impressions? How long were you there for? What were the staff like? Paint this whole picture for us of what Aspiro was like for you.
All right, for sure. Let's dive into it. So the first thing that happened was my parents told me, they said, you're going to Salt Lake City. These guys are going to pick you up and they're going to drive you to this wilderness program. And I was like, okay. I voluntarily was like, I need to get out of my cycle because it was becoming dangerous and I could see myself slipping into a bad way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so these guys picked me up. These big military guys, and they set me in this giant black van. And I remember that one of the guys was driving. No one was in the front seat. I was on the left, kind of trapped in, and then there was another big guy who was blocking the door so I couldn't get out. And that was my first feeling of, I don't know how I feel about this kind of thing. And they took me to this giant warehouse. And I got all my wilderness gear and everything. And I remember when I was born, I was paralyzed on the right side of my body. So certain movements are tougher than the average individual. And I remember they had me try and pack this bag. And it took me 10 minutes for something that would take someone probably 5 or 6. And these guys were frustrated and they were like, God dang it, like, why don't you just do this already? And they took me into this little stall And basically, they waited outside. They had me pull all my clothes off. They had me jump around a little bit, make sure I wasn't carrying any weapons or drugs on me, which makes sense. And they drove 4 hours and they said, "This is going to be your last good meal for a while. Where do you want to go?" Which was pretty awesome. That instead of just dropping me into this place in the middle of the woods, they let me get a good meal first. And so I chose In-N-Out Burger. I got animal fries and a giant animal-sized burger. 2 things, fries, and these guys paid for everything. And then they took me, it was nighttime, and they took me down to what they called base camp. I remember it was the weirdest sight I'd ever seen. I get down there, I've got my 75-pound pack on, and I drop my bag, and there's a campfire. All these guys are sitting around, and base camp was basically where, before they put you into placement, they would basically assess you for a few days. And then they would put you into groups based on which you fit in best with. It was really weird though, because they're doing something really weird. I couldn't figure out what it was at first, but they were putting talcum powder on their testicles. It was really weird. And I was walking around, I was like, what are these guys doing? And apparently it was something called icing your fairies, which just basically was a way of, after sweating, people would do it at night. But I just thought it was really weird that they were all doing it in a circle. Then after a few days, I got placed into Boys 2, which was the anxiety and depression group at the time, because they decided that would be the best group for me. About a week and a half there, receiving therapy, walking around the woods, going hiking, rock climbing, all kinds of stuff like that. The food was pretty basic. It wasn't terrible, but it was pretty basic. You had 40 minutes to cook, clean, and put everything away, or you wouldn't get spices, basically, because the foods were so bland that the guides would carry spices, and those spices were used as incentives, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't a terrible experience. I spent 3 months there, and then about a month in, they decided that Boys 2 was not the place for me, so they sent me to Boys 1, which was drugs and defiance. I started doing some more treatment that way, and it was way better. The therapist was stricter, which was nice, because that's what I needed at the time. I would say it was a good experience, and I learned a lot about my self-image and self-reflection in those 3 months.
And when you use the word therapist, is this somebody who is licensed to give you therapy? Right. Okay. And
yeah, this is a licensed therapist.
Okay. And you're there for 3 months. Do you have any idea how much this costs your family for you to be there for the 3 months?
I'm not going to discuss that. All I know that it was that it was very expensive, but I just remember we would be able to talk to our parents through letters, and I remember 5 or 6 times my dad bringing up the money aspect and how this is costing them a lot of money.
Right. Okay. So your parents are giving you small reminders that they're hoping that this program will work for you because of the amount that's gone into it.
Exactly. And I still feel bad to this day on the amount of money that they've spent on me and getting me through programs, and the amount of due diligence that my parents have tried to get me to a better state like I'm in now.
It's difficult that you carry that guilt, though. I think it's natural for you to feel that way. But when a behavior consultant is telling you that the best thing for your child is for them to go through one of these programs, it's difficult then for your parents to look elsewhere for support or other options.
Yeah, for sure. And I just remembered, actually, when I first heard about Wilderness, it was at the very end of my stay at Fusion. I had this friend, her name was Ellie Kelman. She was a cocaine addict, and we were all in a band together. And she told me about Wilderness and how it really helped her with her addiction. And she said she got sent to a place called Red Cliff Ascent, and that really helped. So I brought that up to my mom, kind of as a last ditch effort to get myself the help I needed with my addictions and my problems, and different strategies to cope with my anxiety that didn't involve illicit substances, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And after your 3-month stay at Aspiro, would you say that you had some of the tools that you needed to help you deal with addiction?
Definitely not. Because they didn't even really work on it that much. It was more about learning about how to live in a routine instead of kind of just doing your day to day, having fun, going out partying, and just so much switch up every day. Because that's what life is it's a routine. You get up, you go to work, you take care of the kids, you go to bed, and it's getting used to that and not getting stressed out that your life isn't too exciting or too crazy. And you can do all these things to spice up your life, but at the end, it's still a routine. It's still a program, and you have to run your own program in order to maintain sanity, if that makes sense.
Okay, so how is it from this 3-month program that you end up in Maple Lake Academy? Is there a break between these two programs, or do you go straight from one to the other?
No, I remember it was the very end of my stay, and this kid named Ellis was going. He was my buddy. We were super alike though, so we'd always butt heads and we'd fight each other. And I remember one day we were sitting in, they called it the shelter. We were sitting in this wooden shelter, and we got in an argument, and he and I got into a fist fight, and it just turned out nasty. But he was still a pretty all right guy. And being a dude, that's really all you need to settle something. Is just knock someone out, and then you guys talk it out. You know what I mean? So he and I got put in the big black van again, and they drove us all the way out from Mount Pleasant, Utah to Benjamin, Utah. And I walked into the place, and the moment I walked in, I knew something was up. I knew something was wrong. I walked in and I saw a kid running on all fours like an animal, sprinting around just sprinting up and down the stairs. And that was, I knew that I was sent to the wrong place from the moment I got there.
Are your family aware at this point that you're being transitioned from one place to another?
Yes, they are. And they'd made that decision through my ed consultant, and my ed consultant believed this was the best move for me, which I do want to say that not everything at that program was bad. There was a lot of stuff that still leads to PTSD and issues, but I did still learn a lot there, more about organization and how to deal with issues, because there were so many issues that went on there that you really got used to it and you could deal with your own internally, if that makes sense.
And Maple Lake Academy, we've had a previous guest on the show named Daphne who spoke about her experiences. It's not co-ed, is that right? It's my understanding that there's a boys section and a girls section and they're not mixed.
Yes. Yeah. So the girls' school is about a mile away from the boys' school. And that's where the guys go for horse riding lessons. We do chores there. But that's basically our only interaction with the girls when we first get there, seeing them walking around. And it's funny because you're 3 months into the woods, just walking past females, not being able to talk to them, and then being thrown into a program where you're seeing women every day. And it wasn't as much of an issue for me, but a lot of kids would like say snide remarks. They would like catcall these females, and it just felt icky. It felt weird.
I'm sure we'll talk about this a bit later on, but some of your experiences that you have noted online mention that the staff would actually encourage that behavior in themselves at times as well.
Oh, no. There must have been confusion there. What I'm saying is there was a lot of student to staff sexual harassment. A lot of the people that worked there were only 2 to 3 years older than we were. No, like 4 or 5 at the time. But like I'd say the oldest person that wasn't a therapist was about 27. And I remember there was this kid named Bryce, and he was there for some really weird issues regarding trying to molest his mother and all kinds of sexual issues. Like he would play with himself, like right in front of other people. He was just really, really weird. And I remember I had multiple dreams about the kid and him coming into my room, because when I first got there, they had what was called a Jack and Jill style room. So you had one room, then you had a shared bathroom, and then you had the other room, and there were no doors in the place. It was almost like a hospital setting, if that makes sense. It means that this kid was walking into my room, sitting in the corner and playing with himself. And he would do this in front of female staff members. He had no respect whatsoever for other people. And this kid was just a menace to society. Like he was Yeah, like he needed to be there. And I'm not saying I didn't, but he needed to be there. And that was one of the scariest things to me, is watching that on the daily and in front of females, playing with yourself and doing nasty things.
Do you know if this individual even recognized that he was doing it? Because I know that there's like compulsive masturbation disorder or something like that means that the individual doesn't even realize that they're doing it, or was he aware that that's what he was doing when he would enter a room full of people?
I'm pretty sure that it wasn't like stress related or anything like that. He literally just had a super hyperactive sex drive and would need to,
Okay. Right. So you arrive at Maple Lake Academy. Your family have sanctioned the decision to move you from Aspiro to Maple Lake after the fist fight. You know that something's wrong when you arrive because you're witnessing one of the residents acting strangely on all fours, going up and down the stairs over and over.
Yeah. And they had this guy named Tanner who I had absolutely despised for reasons I'm not going to go into right now. We could talk about that later. But he took me into my room, and I see that it's like bunk bed style, which I thought was pretty cool. Kind of reminded me of like a summer camp, right? And I look over and I see this kid with a mattress on the floor, and he has a staff member like literally on the other side of the mattress watching him. And this kid is just off the rails. He's throwing shit. He's trying to like cause a huge commotion, just as much trouble as he can cause. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, is this a normal occurrence for here? I asked the staff guy that checked me in, and he goes, you'll have stuff like that. I'm pretty sure you're not perfect. That was the first thing the guy said to me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so he takes me into my room and he says, empty out your backpack, because I still had my backpack from the wilderness place. So I emptied out my bag, dirt spills all over the floor, and he starts going through everything, right? Like, I mean, that's just protocol. So I wasn't too unnerved by it. And then I remember we got, as a final parting gift, we got a thing of trail mix and a thing of M&Ms. And this was the other reason when I noticed something was wrong, because he said, you're not allowed to have outside food, and threw away the food that I had earned from my 3 months there. And I put earned in quotation marks.
Right. So straight away, you're kind of recognizing that there's going to be a lot of control and a lot of strictness around your food and drink intake.
Exactly. And I mean, I get there, he dumps everything on the floor, and he says, all right, it's time for school. Doesn't even let me like kind of unwind, doesn't let me get some time to myself. And he brings me down these stairs to the schoolroom, which are these tiny buildings. There's 5 or 6 people in each classroom. There's 5 classrooms. I think there were like 15 students in total in the boys' school at that time. And there were 3 different teachers. And it was really weird because they had people all the way from age 14 to age 18 in the same classroom, learning the exact same material. So you would get these kids, which would totally make sense because they're depending on the day, it would either be 16, 17-year-olds being taught at a 14-year-old level, or vice versa. For example, we had a government class, and there was this kid named Graham in there who had just turned 14, just got into the program. He was failing it, and they were saying, it's your fault that you're failing this class, when he didn't have even the forefront in his thought to think about what business education is at that time.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. And then they would take you outside for, they called it PE. And it was pretty standard. You just go outside, you play sports. And then once a month, they would make you do, I believe it was 150 push-ups and 50 sit-ups. It was some standardized test. I remember the schooling was terrible. Like, I remember they wouldn't like really instruct. They would just go off of videos. And there was one teacher, he would just play cartoons, and he would play movies the whole time, and he wouldn't actually discuss anything of interest, anything of actual education, if that makes sense.
Right. So, how much oversight was there on the education being delivered from outside sources? Was anybody coming in, do you know of, to make sure that the curriculum was being taught in the way that it should be?
Not really. I think I saw a few people come in. They were like financial ed directors, and they would shut down whatever lesson they were saying as they heard the person walk through the door and got the text, "Hey, we have an ed consultant in." They would tell all of the students, "You guys need to behave yourself or you will get in trouble. We have ed consultants coming in." I remember a lot of the kids would purposely try and act out to get the place shut down. Which, I mean, I wasn't really a huge proprietor of that, but I still would chime in funny stuff in the middle of class and mess around a little bit. I was 16 at the time. You gotta, you know.
So, you arrive at this program, things are dodgy. Do you think it would have been different if you would have gone there with your family? I don't think they would have shown somebody on the mattress if they were showing families around.
Actually, they would have family tours a lot, and they would. Actually, they had a separate intervention that was just called mattress, but they had a separate intervention which I was on for 3 months, and you start going crazy, and they lock you in the group room, and all your food is brought up to you. You're kept with a staff at all times, so you have like no sense of personal space. You're not allowed to talk to that said staff member unless it is approved through your therapist.
So, you are still receiving therapy at Maple Lake Academy as you were at Aspiro. And the therapists, are they licensed?
I believe so. I didn't really do much research into it. Like the guy that I got, his name was Logan, and he was this old guy. He was very knowledgeable, but he had a temper to him, and he would get really worked up really fast. And I remember he had a certain thing against me because I really didn't want to be there. And he kept saying, "Oh, you're not following the program. You're not buying into the program," just because I would not do certain things that were asked of me. And they had some really, really weird punishments. Like they had one, they called it red light. And when you were on red light, you had to stay in arm's length of the staff at all times. Eating, showering, they would leave the door open. Not when you're sleeping, they would have staff outside of the rooms. I would get placed on that a lot for questioning basically what they were preaching, if that makes sense.
So, just briefly, before we talk a little bit more about your therapy, what was the day to day like? What how many people to a room? What time would you wake up? What sorts of meals did you have? Were there daily activities that you had to commit to, and how often was therapy?
So first you wake up at 7, you'd have to make your bed, get dressed. There wasn't any like special uniforms or anything, but they wouldn't. It was really weird. Was they wouldn't let you wear anything with logos on it. It all had to be plain tees. So people would show up looking like 5-year-olds in like bright yellow plain t-shirts with shorts because they'd try and accessorize and have that feeling of control, that they had control of what they wear. That be controlled. So you'd wake up, you go down to breakfast, and the breakfasts were served by the staff. They were very minuscule amounts of food. It was like cereal one day, one Eggo waffle the next day, and the best was when we would get Jimmy Dean microwavable sandwiches. And they had a woman who was the cook, and when I first got there, it was a woman, and she was this old crotchety old lady, and she would just chase people around with a spatula. That's pretty much all she did, and keep them out of her kitchen so she could cook. The food was very fatty. I remember I had a really bad case of acne when I was there because I was constantly ingesting greasy food. I gained close to 75 pounds while I was there. Yeah, it just wasn't that good. But that was at first when that woman Suzanne was there. And then, well, I'll go into that later. But then after you had that, you would go to school until about 3 o'clock. You would have a few breaks in there, and you go to the school, which I talked about earlier. And then after school, you would, around 1, you would eat lunch, then you would come back to school. And then at 3, right as soon as school's over, you go up to what they call the group room, and you would have group therapy. So everyone seated around in a giant circle. Daphne, in her interview, states that it was pretty much a shit fest. Everyone was just yelling at each other. There was no control. And that's pretty much how it was at the boys' school as well. There wasn't much oversight. The therapists there was one therapist, and then you had 2 staffs behind these couches just crapping on each other. So-and-so did this. This person did this. Because you're trying to stay out of the hot seat. Because if you get placed in the hot seat, you'll get in trouble, even if you didn't do anything. So the goal is to stay. That's literally all I learned, was placing blame off other places from those groups therapy sessions.
Right, yeah, because you don't want to be put on red light or anything like that.
Exactly. And they called it a green light system. Green is good. You're on what they call line of sight. So you still have to be in sight of the staff, but you can go do things. You can go outside on the weekends. You can play board games. You can listen to approved music through music director. And every time I talk like that, I'm putting everything in quotes. You can't see my face. So
in terms of therapy, was this sort of like a weekly thing? Was it on a one-to-one basis between you and the therapist, or was it group therapy, or were there different versions?
It's pretty hard to understand the different types of therapy. So there were 3 different types of therapy that we would receive. First would be individual, which would be 2 or 3 times a week. And during your individual therapy, sometimes they bring your family in, they talk about issues, how you're doing, stuff like that. And in your individual therapy, you would talk about things like, they had this giant binder that you got when you came there. It was called the Success Binder. And you would, on Tuesdays, you would go in to what they called team, which is basically another giant shit session where every staff in the whole place, close to 50 to 75 people in a room, and you're sitting on a couch with your therapist next to you, and they basically are telling you all the things you're doing wrong.
Oh my goodness. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and Daphne mentioned this in her interview as well. But basically, and then they just talk about all the shit you're doing wrong in your therapy. You're not learning much. They basically tell you, oh, you're going to end up in prison. You're going to end up dead. You're going to end up sucking dick under a bridge. All this negative stuff. So you're constantly, your head is surrounded with all this negativity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So this is on Tuesday. This is separate to the individual therapy. So now we've spoken about the 2 different types.
There's individual, then there's team, which isn't related to therapy. That's just how you level through the program. Then the second type of therapy is that group therapy where you're all together. And then the third type is called recreational therapy. And every single one of these have a different therapist. So group therapy, therapists switch throughout the week. So Monday, it would be my therapist, and he'd basically try and solve problems going on within the house. He would teach motivational lectures. We'd watch movies. It wasn't terrible. And then this guy, Ron, he was this old disabled guy. He was pretty awesome. I liked that guy. He would talk about unity and all this kind of like cultish almost bullshit. And the third person was he was this big overweight dude. His name was Josh. And we would call the therapist by their first name, not like Dr. Richards or something. All the therapists were called by first name, which I thought was really weird. This guy, Josh, had 2 giant dogs, and they were therapy dogs. So they would walk around, and kids would pet them as they're crying. And so group therapy was probably one of the more beneficial times, I would say, of all the times there. And then they had everybody's least favorite. This was like hell. It was called recreational therapy. Daphne also mentions in hers, she mentions recreational therapy a few times as well. And I saw that you had a little bit of confusion over the 3. So I'm as simple as I can and make it as concise as I can so that you and the viewers can distinguish the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then recreational therapy, we had this guy named Tim. He was a short ginger man, and he had a very, very short temper. He could snap like that. Just you'd say something and he'd just be yelling in your face. What recreational therapy was you would get these tasks that were super mundane things that took a shit ton of time, and they were very difficult. I remember one time we had to, I think it was the weirdest one that I ever did. We were blindfolded and we had a partner behind us, and Tim said that we had to guide our partner to this toy. It symbolized like helping your friends, being a leader, all this stuff that doesn't really make sense to the task. And if you don't finish it, the next time you have recreational therapy, you have to try the task again with your whole peer group. Does that make more sense than...
Yeah, it does make sense. And I can see why you'd say that this was the one therapy that people were least looking forward to.
Yeah, because it was literally hellish. Like this guy, Tim, he wasn't as bad as I personally knew the recreational therapist from the girls' school. I'm not going to mention her name for security reasons, but she was pretty brutal. She would yell at people. She would put them down. She'd call people stupid a lot. And then when you would pipe up and you would be like, hey, that's not very respectful. Don't be a B word or don't be disrespectful to me. She would start crying.
Yeah, this does sound exactly like what Daphne was talking about.
Exactly. She would start crying and she would say, oh, this reminds me of my sister. You're bringing back my addictions. Like total victim complex for the whole rest of the session. The whole session became about her. They would drop the task, everything would be, and it would just become this giant thing where you're sitting there and it's all about her, basically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like an antagonistic narcissist, that sounds like.
Well, I wouldn't say that it was that intense, but it was definitely enough that it would set people off.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds as though your weeks were pretty full. You spoke about kind of being a routine based within these programs, but it sounds less about routines and education and more about various different types of therapy, perhaps just trying to see which one works.
No, not at all. It's just how their program works. They have the three kinds, and it was very cookie cutter because they were meant for dealing with children with autism. And I'm not autistic. I have fetal alcohol syndrome, which technically is on the autism spectrum, but it's not autism. So their way of dealing with it was they had this giant book. You would sign off on these competencies. Once you got your giant book done in about a year and a half, you were free to go. And either your parents would design another program for you or you would be free to go and kind of live your life.
Yeah, it's definitely painting a picture. I mean, if you're expected to be here for a year and a half, we've talked a little bit about your initial impressions of Maple Lake Academy, how you were integrated into the program and what the program looks like, the type of food that was there. Were you kind of expected to do any of the upkeep of the building? That's sometimes a theme that comes through in some of these conversations.
Definitely. And the only other thing that I was saying is it was very, very control based. It was very, because a lot of these kids are coming from homes where their parents basically let them do whatever the heck they want. And then they break and they're like, oh no, I need to fix my kid. So they send them to treatment because they don't know what to do. And so they have a very rigid structure in that program that they stick to for every single student. It's not individualized, nothing. They say on their website that it's an individualized treatment plan. It's not. They stick to the exact same cookie cutter method for every person, which obviously doesn't work.
With the therapists, you said you believe that they were trained. What about the staff members? You said that most of them were quite young.
Yeah, a lot of them were just college students that were looking for a job and hours so they could go into whatever they were thinking about pursuing. It basically taking care of these mentally ill kids was a way for them to get internship hours, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And were the staff trained to use some of the techniques on the residents that you spoke about in your Yelp review around things like therapy holds?
Oh, yes. So there was a day, it would happen once every 2 months, and it was called PCS Day. And all the staff would go upstairs, and there was this big fat dude. His name was Logan Nita, and he loved teaching that because basically what he would get to do is he would get to hold people down and teach them these holds by holding them down themselves. And I don't know about the specifics of that class because the door was shut and you could just hear people being thrown to the ground for about 3 hours. But I do remember that the therapy holds were abused a lot. There were a lot of people that would use it at the smallest stuff. And there's one shift particularly because there were changing shifts and it would be different staff for every shift. Like they had 3 people one day, and the next day it would be another 3 people, and the next day it would be another 3 people, and then you'd have your on-call staff who would come in and help. And there was this one shift, and it was these guys, they were like super frat boyish, if that makes sense. Like one of them had a giant mullet, he had like another one had like a giant curly mustache, like just trying.
I'm picturing Stranger Things in my mind.
Pretty much, actually. That's a real comparison. And their whole thing was be a man, do this, do that. If you do this, you are not a man, you are weak. That was that one shift's mentality. And a lot of times the smallest thing would happen. Someone would piss them off and they would go for those therapeutic holds.
Do you recall ever being placed into one of these holds yourself?
Almost. I almost was. When I was on that mattress thing, which we'll talk more about later, I was really ticked off. I was having a bad day and I got really ticked off and I was tired of being trapped in that room. And I remember I punched a door, and this guy, the Mr. Mustache, the guy I told you about, the baseball player, he came up to me, giant 6'2" guy. He came up to me and he stood up, kind of squares up his chest, gets like in my face and goes, "Don't do that again," and like gets ready to jump on me and slam me to the ground. All of the other staff were pretty good when it came to holds because a lot of the kids would act out. They would throw shit. They would try and start fights. I remember it was about my 4th week in, and this kid had an iPod Shuffle, and he'd lost it. And there was this other kid. His name was we'll call him Trayvon. His name was Trayvon, and he was a kleptomaniac. He was known for stealing things. Suzanne, the chef, left the knife down when she was cooking in the kitchen, which was against policy. All knives are supposed to be locked up the moment you weren't using them. Trayvon was sitting in his room, and these 2 guys, Sohan and Gil, they both went into the kitchen. They were just looking to start something. So Sohan grabs a knife and comes over to Trey's room and starts giving him shit, just riffraff, you know what I mean? He grabs this knife and just starts like taunting him with it and trying to intimidate this kid. And Trey said something that pisses him off. This kid comes up with the knife and gets right to about the kid's chest. I'm watching this from the upstairs. There's an upstairs balcony, and I'm sitting there. I was playing a game or something. I don't remember what I was doing. And I was sitting there over the balcony watching all this. And one of the female staff jumped on Sohan's back and grabbed the knife from him. And he's slashing in the air. He's punching at things. And she gets him down on the ground. And he's way bigger than this girl. So I'm worried for her safety. So I yell, "Hey, staff, we need someone down here." So Tanner runs in and he subdues the kid, tackles him on the ground, and says, "That was not okay. You are now on red light isolation," which means he had to be arm's length from the staff. He had to be on what was called suicide watch, and he was placed on mattress and away from the community. So the worst punishment you can get. And I remember this kid, 2 days later, we were all in class and we heard him yelling, like screaming at the top of his lungs, like, "Fuck you, I don't have to listen to you, like you're just a piece of shit, like you're just a college worker, you don't have no say of what I do." And so we all ran out there, and the staff were trying to hold us back. And we all run out there. Just imagine a bunch of like interested kids, because basically we were kept in a kid mentality. Like we weren't allowed to play video games. We weren't allowed to watch many movies. We weren't really able to go out. We were kind of trapped in this house.
Yeah. Well, in that insular community as well, if anything out of routine happens, it's a huge deal.
It's very exciting. It was amazing when something like that would happen, which is terrible that something that negative, that bad was the only stimulus that someone would get.
And somebody acting out in that moment of rage as well with a weapon like that actually could have committed murder or manslaughter.
Yeah, and that wasn't the first time that kid had tried to kill someone either. But he was standing on top of our balcony and he was trying to jump off. And I remember when I was in school, I was like, where are all the staff? And then I heard Sohan yelling and we all ran out there, got held back by people, and we sprinted out there and see what was happening. And he had five of the big staff who were supposed to be watching the classroom at the time, but more important things were called to, and they're all holding onto this boy's legs as he's dangling off of this balcony trying to jump off. So they'd caught his legs and were keeping him from falling this probably 25, 50 feet to the ground.
This is just escalating, and the staff that are expected to deal with this are young adults without a lot of training, and all that they are equipped with are these therapy holds that are often used in an abusive manner anyway.
Exactly.
Wow. Oh my goodness. What do you do here? Do you call law enforcement?
They didn't. Nope. They just put him in a room, said, you're on isolation, you're not allowed to talk to anyone. And that was that. And he would come out and he'd talk to people. He didn't give a crap, and they wouldn't do anything about it.
Well, this is where the programs fall apart. If there are individual residents who can't be broken down by the awful abuses and disciplines that are in place in these programs, what is there left for the staff to do?
Exactly. And that was when a lot of staff would quit. There was a very high turnover because a lot of them couldn't hack it. They either felt bad for putting people in these restraints like a normal human. So there was a very high turnover. There was no stability in staff members. So you would get super excited because someone you like would be there. And then the next day they just wouldn't show up for like ever, and someone else would replace them. So there was no stability whatsoever.
So even though they were trying to establish routine and consistency, the staff turnaround would not allow for that.
Exactly, because, well, it was a pretty stressful job. A lot of the kids were pretty high anxiety, high hypertension, would act out, hit shit, throw things, jump around, just try and start things. So it would make sense that there's a high turnover in an environment like that. I remember this one girl, her name was Lorene, and they had a rule. The female staff were not allowed to hold down students, which makes sense because that could easily become a sexual harassment lawsuit. One of the patients could touch someone. It's just turned into this giant thing. This chick, Lorene, was getting really mad at this guy named Devin. And she said, I will put you in a hold if you cuss at me one more time. He was just swearing at her. He was just sitting there saying, you're a B word, you're this, you're that. And she got so frustrated, she marches him off the basketball court that he was sitting on, shoves him onto the ground, says, don't do that again, lets go of him, puts him on red status, and I didn't see him for the rest of the day, just for cussing her out.
I can't remember if Daphne said that she believes that the conditions in the boys' house were more severe than the conditions in the girls' house.
Well, I wouldn't say that they were more severe. I would just think, based on psychology, girls are more, they'll try and hit you with the emotional bombs. Like they'll try and like dig deep and try and hurt you with feelings. Whereas guys will just brawl it out. Like anything that ticks us off, we'll just start swinging. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it was more dangerous, it was just different, if that makes sense.
And you said that these programs usually last around a year and a half. So is that how long you spent in Maple Lake Academy?
I was at Maple Lake Academy for 2 years.
Right. So you had your tenure extended.
Exactly. But around, I want to say 6 to 8. No, it was closer to the end, pretty close to the end of my stay. Showed up and he and I were just starting shit every day. We were getting in trouble. We were just bad for each other. And they put us on what they called a communication block, where you couldn't talk to that person. If you did, you got put on a red status and you couldn't do anything fun. More of that control aspect, but to control the community, which makes sense in the place that you're living at, but at the same time injures the psyche, if that makes sense. They put me on this thing. I go up to team on Tuesday, and I remember I got 2 or 3 things signed off. I came out pretty happy. And I went back because they'd send you to the team thing where you get your competency set off, and then they'd send you back to school. And I remember they called me back up, which almost never happens. So I knew something was up, either something good or something bad. And you could hear them through the group room all the way downstairs. You could hear them talking about you. Other people could hear it too. So you could hear, oh, so-and-so did this. So-and-so is so disrespectful. So-and-so will never get a job. We need to help him get a job. But then they do nothing to help that person get a job. And it just repeats the cycle. But I got called back up. And this guy goes, my therapist goes, sit down now. Like sounded like my dad or my mom, like authority figure of importance. So I'm like, okay, big guy sits on the other side of me. I have another staff who is sitting in front of me. So I'm cornered in this triangle. And they stand up and they say, hey, we're going to put you on something called Insight, where you're going to be on this mattress 24/7. You get 10 minutes to go outside every day. All your schoolwork will be brought up to you. All of your food and drink will be brought up to you. You will stay with the staff 24/7, and you will be basically silent unless you are spoken to. And I was on that for 3 months.
So this is the point where your therapist, Logan, makes the decision to put you on mattress, trying to get you to comply with the rules because you're acting out of line.
You comply with control to kind of get me to listen to their doctrine, their procedures, their rules, however you want to put it. Just follow the rules of the program, because I just wouldn't. I didn't like being there. I felt like I was forced there afterwards, and I just didn't want to be there. So for the whole 2 years, I put up a fight being there.
So was it originally supposed to be 3 months? Because in your Yelp review, you mentioned that your therapist had a head injury and that complicated things a little bit.
So towards the end of my stay, I probably had 4 or 5 more months left. I remember the best times I had when I was on mattress was when I would be able to go outside and I would talk to the staff about what was going on in my head. I remember I was sitting there and I was going on 2.5 months. And I'll talk about Logan's head injury and how that affected in a second, but this is connected to that. I remember I was sitting there and I was really upset. I felt like I would never get off this, because they wouldn't tell you a definite date of this is when you're going back into the community. So there was this uncertainty of you not knowing when you were going to be re-entered into society. And you're sitting in this room 24/7. Your mind is going crazy. They give you a journal and they let you write whatever you want in it. And this is where invasion of privacy happens, is while you're sleeping. I caught them doing it at least 10 times. They would take the pictures of what you wrote in your own personal diary and they would send it to your therapist. And then he would grill you out for saying, I hate this place.
Oh, that is such a huge violation of privacy, ethics, everything.
Speaking of which, all mail was censored. You would get mail, and if it had anything, something's wrong with this place doesn't feel right, they would instantly take that letter and they'd say, this is not appropriate, or this does not comply to our standards, and they'd throw it in the trash.
Oh my goodness, that is awful.
Or phone calls. Every Sunday, we would get these 10-minute, 20-minute phone calls with our parents. And we'd be able to kind of talk to them and say, hey, I miss you. I can't wait till I get to go home and all this stuff. But the moment you brought up something was wrong with this place isn't okay, there's kids doing all this weird stuff, they would say, oh, he's just in a bad spot, he'll call you back later. And then they'd hang up. So
very similar to the MO that we've heard about in a lot of other TTI programs across America.
Exactly. Very, very cookie cutter, very to those TTIs as well. But back to the mattress thing, I was sitting there and I was just, my will to live was crushed. I was sitting there for 2.5 months. I started writing on walls. I stopped taking care of myself. They'd let you take showers. They'd let you do whatever. I remember I had acne all over my face. My hair was down to my neck. I had snot that had formed from crying every day. I was sitting there and I was playing with this paper cup. And I remember thinking to myself, no, it wasn't paper, it was a plastic cup. And I remember thinking to myself, if I crush this hard enough, I could hit a vein and I could end. And now the staff had gone to take a crap or whatever he was doing. And I was sitting there alone in my thoughts. Their one job was to make sure that this didn't happen. And when I was sleeping, when I was on a mattress, there was this giant, it was like a twin size bed. So not twin, it was twin size bed. So it's very small. They just took the mattress from my bunk bed, they put it on a cot, and they put it in the middle of the group room. And there was this giant fan that would just go around and around and around and around and around. And every morning I would look at that fan and I would imagine getting a chair, standing on top of that chair, and kicking it off with a rope attached to my neck. That was the state that they had pushed my brain to. Yeah, but back to Logan, he was sitting in his room doing some paperwork, and over in his chair, cracked his head open. And the old man, instead of deciding, hey, I need to call my wife, drove himself to the hospital, got blood gushing down his face. Man drives himself to the hospital. And he's sitting there and they're like, you shouldn't have done that. You should have stayed on the ground and we called 911. We would have got you. Long story short, I think he suffered a traumatic brain injury of some kind, and it affected his memory. So I was supposed to get off that mattress intervention. I heard the staff talking about it. I heard everyone talking about it. Logan goes, what are you talking about? Alex has only been on this for a week. He needs more insight. They're all trying to tell him. They're like, Logan, he's been on this for 2 months. And Logan's like, no, I swear he's been on it 2 weeks. He needs more time to think about himself, more time to be with himself. And I stayed on there for another 2 weeks before my mom called him and said, this is not okay, that this is too long. And I don't remember if it was my mom that called him or one of the staff that was talking to him about it, but I remember them saying that it wasn't okay.
So your mum at this point was aware of the intervention that they were using on you?
Yes. And I still am not sure what her thoughts on it were. I know she thought it was pretty intense, but at the time my parents were in such a form of struggle because of everything that I had done, everything I was going through, all of my personal issues, that they were just looking for a last ditch effort. So they were listening to whatever Logan said.
Well, if everything was so censored as well in terms of your phone calls and your mail, it does lead you to wonder the details that they were giving your parents around what the intervention really consisted of.
Well, what they did was they called my mom in. I was on the mattress intervention. I was sitting in my room. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone. And my therapist said, hey, your mom's coming out. This will help lift your spirits. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. Like, because we get to see our parents maybe 3-4 times a year. And then every 3 months, we would have something called a parent seminar where they would come and they'd preach all this like stuff about unity and being one with your family. And it was all pretty good stuff. Honestly, that was definitely something that improved with my time there, was my relationship with my family. Long story short, my mom gets there. Logan walks upstairs and he off a copy of The Giving Tree. Have you read The Giving Tree?
I haven't, but I have heard of it.
Basically, it's a child's book. And the whole point is this kid, I don't remember the specifics, but it's something where it's these 2 trees and she would give like the nutrients to her son and give and give and give and give and give, and it would make her weaker. And this is a child's book that he's giving me to read out loud to my mom until the mom withered away. And it was just the kid tree. So she's breaking down into tears. I'm breaking down into tears. And I remember her sitting there and like, I could see in her head that she was just so sad that this was happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about altruism. You give, and you never mention it and you never expect anything in return.
Exactly. And I feel bad to this day for how much I've taken from my parents, partly because of some of that stuff that they talked about in their therapy sessions.
Oh my goodness. So you're on mattress for like 3+ months. And how long is left of your time at Maple Lake at this point? Or is this where your mum kind of says no more, like you have this experience around the Giving Tree and then you start to try and rebuild things yourselves?
Well, that was the whole point of the family therapy. The family therapy was really good. That is the one thing between Aspiro and Maple Lake that I loved, was the reconnection of the family. Because when a lot of times when people hit, I want to say like 16, 17, they want to push away from their family when they need them the most, because they're going through puberty, they're going through all these issues. That was the one thing that Maple Lake was very good at, was every week you would have a call with your family and they would talk about unity. My little brother and I have never really been close. And they bring him on. They'd say, "How do you miss your brother?" Like all this stuff. It really made me feel closer with my parents with that. Plus, every 3 months, the parent seminars. I don't believe anything else got the desired effect while I was there, except for my connection with my family.
So Maple Lake Academy here may be potentially tapping into something that is beneficial for people outside of the more controlling, coercive, and sometimes perhaps abusive methods that they're using.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that it was all bad. I'm not trying to spread that, oh, I was abused, love me. Like, I'm just sharing my story so that other people can know the positives and the negatives of this place before they send their kids here.
Yeah, absolutely. And where is Maple Lake Academy now in terms of its existence? Is it still going strong?
No. So I would say about 4 or 5 months ago at the girls' school, one of my old buddies from there sent me this. There was a girl at the girls' school that she hit her head. She did something. She messed up her brain in some way. After about a week of her pleading, they took her to the doctor. And then after she went to the doctor, she's like, "I really don't feel good. Something is wrong. Like something is biologically wrong with my body. I feel like I can't breathe. All this stuff's going on," whatever it was.
I've read this news article, and what you've said there about them waiting so long to take her to the hospital has just reminded me of where I've heard this before.
Yeah. And long story short, this girl dies in her bed. So right now, Maple Lake Academy is in what is called a conditional license hold. So what that means is they have to finish everyone that they have right now, and they're not allowed to admit any new patients, I believe, into the program.
And this is for both the boys and girls schools.
I'm not sure about that. So I'm not going to say that I know or don't know, but the girls' school was put on a conditional foreclosure.
Oh gosh, that's absolutely devastating about that girl. Was it common practice for staff to really not take residents to hospital if they needed to be seen?
I don't think so. We didn't really have anyone that needed to go. We had one kid that had a mental breakdown. They took him.
Oh, there's been cases of people with broken bones and bone fragments floating about in their limbs that weren't taken to hospital, people with chronic dental conditions that weren't allowed to be seen by professionals. It's at this point, which is awful, not surprising that this person who was complaining of being in pain from sustaining a head injury wouldn't be taken for a professional overview.
Exactly. Another good example of that, actually, that I completely forgot about until now was when I was at Aspiro. I got hit in the eyeball with a boot. This kid got mad, hit me in the eyeball with a boot. It knocked loose two of my teeth. Two of my teeth are still loose from it. And my eyeball swelled to about the size of half of that of a baseball. And it was just a black eye, so I wasn't too worried. And I kept doing my thing, walking around. And I asked him, I'm like, "Hey, I think I also have an ear infection. That's kind of weird that that's connected, but it would make sense if I suffered blunt force trauma to the brain, that it would also be connected to my ear." So I'm thinking I need to go to the doctors. So I contacted them and I was like, "Hey, this isn't okay. Something's wrong." And it took them a week. And by that time, my eye had become infected and I was barely able to open it by the time that I got medical help. Apparently I had an infection in my ear too from whatever happened. It just completely screwed me up for about 2 weeks.
Right. So just kind of leaving it a little bit too long before getting you some professional help.
We ride as a van. It would make sense that they can't medevac you out at the same time. So, I mean, it kind of sucked, but I can see both sides of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can also understand why staff might think that people are making up having, severe pain or severe headaches or any symptoms that might cause somebody to need to go to the hospital. If people are trying to get out of these excruciating therapy sessions or these sessions with therapists who make things go on and on and on and over and over and over. But I feel like it is also the because when you're in the care, the sole care and custody of these staff members, it is also their duty to make sure that they take these things seriously. So when this individual is coming to them and telling them that there is something not right with her after she sustained this injury, it's beyond negligent that she died from that. It's absolutely beyond negligent that they didn't take her for a professional diagnosis.
Exactly. And the fact that the therapist didn't do anything, the staff didn't do anything. I don't know the physical logistics and all that, but at the same time, the fact that this girl wasn't cared for and she died in their care, that they didn't take care of what needed to get taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's without discussing the residents that you were with who were clearly struggling with ill mental health that probably needed some different, as you said, some person-centered, individualized care packages that were not being delivered within Maple Lake Academy.
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily. I think that Ron, the therapist Ron, the old crippled guy, I think that he was the one that did the best. He and Josh were the therapists that did the best job of individualizing therapy to people who need it. Whereas Logan, my therapist, was just this old guy. He was very cookie cutter. He had basically a copy of the original DSM, and he would use that. DSM in psychology is what they use to diagnose or put symptoms of mental illness or stuff like that. The original DSM was about 30 pages. The new one is about 500 pages. Because originally when Freud and all that, and they all decided the thought of, hey, let's see if this therapy thing will work. They didn't really know what they were doing. They kind of made a bunch of bull crap up, and it stuck, so they kept it. And that's kind of how therapy was created, actually. But even though I'm not saying that therapy isn't beneficial, therapy can be very beneficial if used in the right way.
I absolutely agree that therapy in the right hands with the right people can be beneficial for the majority of people. But there's so many different types of therapy out there. And the environment that you are forced to exist in during your time at Maple Lake Academy, just take the red light system or the mattress intervention are just two examples of how can you have truly positive therapy and truly positive experiences if they're overshadowed by this type of exploitative methods that you're being subjected to. And in that whole sphere, there's such a juxtaposition of positive and negative ideas working against one another, like cognitive dissonance. It's probably difficult even today to kind of untangle everything that happened and all of your thoughts and feelings around your experiences at Maple Lake Academy when you had negative experiences, but it's peppered with some parts that were positive, like this family therapy, for example.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness, Alex, what an absolute roller coaster of an experience. You said in your Yelp review as well that big fan on the ceiling, you still sometimes see that when you close your eyes.
Yeah, there will be times where if I am either, say, I was watching this movie about a year ago. It's called The Room. And this girl gets kidnapped by this dude, and he keeps her in a room. She has a baby in the room with him. And the whole time I had this fear of dread because it brought me right back to that room. Like I was there and I saw that fan. There was a window that was my only solace. And I would look outside and I could see the neighbor, the next door neighbor. He was a farmer. I could see his wife and his daughter doing their daily chores. And that was my only entertainment while I was in there.
And is this a diagnosed form of PTSD that you're suffering with?
No, I wouldn't say it's diagnosed. I might not even say it's PTSD in general. It could just be something left over from that trauma. But I definitely feel like I have some PTSD like symptoms after what I went through there, but I don't know if it's diagnosed. It's not diagnosed, and it's not severe enough that I need medication for it or anything like that.
So a few flashes occasionally just kind of pop up in your everyday life.
Well, not every day. It's very rare.
With the girls' school and the boys' school or buildings, what would happen if somebody was born female but didn't assign themselves to that gender?
Well, the whole thing was very, very much run by Mormon faith. I think there was one or two people who did not associate as Mormon or LDS that worked there, if that makes sense.
Yes, but I mean, when you talk about Utah, I suppose in some ways it's inevitable that there would be deep Mormon ties.
Yes, but if you think about that and you think about ties to Christianity and their beliefs about the homosexual, the transgender, lesbians, all that stuff, and you think about their ties to that and how they think that's a sin, they had a student that was going to go to the boys' school, but nothing ever came of it.
And is that just because that fizzled out, or was that somebody or a system trying to appear progressive but not actually following through?
That's what they did. They at one point they had a gay kid. His name, I'm not going to state his name, but I'm not into men. We'll just put it that way. And this guy would not stop trying to advance towards me. He would not stop advancing.
And that's why they separate the, males and females, essentially, is to stop that from happening. But of course, it's not as black and white as that, as you're about to explain.
Exactly. And this kid was just everyone. He would hit on everybody. And one day he passed a note to another kid that said, "Meet me in the bathroom at 10 p.m." And they did the deed, if you know what I mean. And he got kicked out the next day. And I don't know what to think of that. I don't know if that's a morality thing, if that's connected to the church, if they just can't have that in their community. I don't know how that's all connected. I wasn't really in on that part of it, but it just seemed interesting to me that both kids got kicked out because they were exploring their sexuality.
If you were to become involved with one of the females when you went for your horse riding lessons or something, for example, do you feel like you would have been kicked out?
They probably would have a very serious talk with you, put you on a status, and not let you go off campus.
Right. So I feel like that kind of answers our question around how the LGBTQIA plus community is seen and treated.
Exactly. And I'm an advocate, but I don't swing that way, but I very much respected. I didn't like the kid that was making advancements towards everyone, but I was a pretty big fan of the other kid. And I felt like he was taken advantage of in that situation, which kind of really messed with me. And there were a few examples of that, actually. There was the kid that I mentioned earlier, that Bryce kid that had the masturbation thing.
Yeah.
He paid a kid some weird currency thing that they'd made up, like some bartering trade, to basically ejaculate into a bag and give it to him. God knows what he did with that. But
so he wanted somebody else's sperm.
Basically, this kid was so messed up that he decided one day that he was going to get up and he was going to get this kid's semen for himself for whatever purpose.
Okay. Yeah, that is, I haven't heard of anything like that before. So that is strange, even for me.
This kid he had a weird fascination with snails. They heard about finding snails in his bed, like all kinds of weird stuff. And he was known after this program. He got to, I'm not sure if he was put on a sex registry for it or not, but he was caught looking at little kids in the shower, just all kinds of fucked up shit. Like Maple Lake was not where that kid needed to go. He needed to be somewhere away from people.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things I was alluding to earlier when I was saying that this program was not suitable for all of the residents who were exhibiting some difficulties around ill mental health.
Exactly. And I'm not saying anything against the dude. He was a little weird, but he did him, I did me. Like, I had no issues towards the kid.
It sounded as though he really did need some support that was going to work for him, some type of intervention that was perhaps less coercive and abusive and more helpful.
I think he's doing good now, actually. He went to that other program, which was built around sexual issues like that. And I feel like afterwards he got better because I just texted him to see where he was at the other day. I'm like, hey, Bryce, how's it been? It's been years. Are you good? Are you being good and not doing weird sexual stuff with people? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm collecting DVRs and snails. I was like, okay, good for you.
You all needed some level of support that wasn't abusive and coercive, just to kind of go back on that last comment I made. And even though there was the females building and the males building, and they were about a mile apart, you had different gendered staff members because you were quite close to one of them, I read in a Yelp review.
Yeah, I was very close to that one, and I would do everything together. We'd go walks together. We'd hang out together. We'd talk about like all of our issues. And she was one of the closest people that I had made a connection with there. And then we just kind of like the feelings got there, if that makes sense. Like she started feeling some type of way. I started feeling some type of way, or whatever happened. I don't know. Maybe paths got crossed. And the staff decided that we couldn't be friends anymore. We would have Q staff that were set to us, and they were our staff that were supposed to make sure we were okay.
I'm just kind of thinking and reflecting on how, you're going through all these hormonal changes and surges at this time. You're away from, any people that you might potentially be romantically involved with or explore your sexuality at that time, if that's something that you wanted to do. And then you're getting close to this staff member who's not a licensed therapist. She's a staff member working there. And you said that the oldest was 27. So she's probably a bit younger and closer to your age. So she's not had training in like ethics and how to appropriately, talk about feelings without there being some kind of
a romantic.
Yeah, because obviously therapists are trained in how to make sure that environment doesn't exist basically in the therapist and patient relationship. So this is a staff member, and she's how much older than you is she?
I would say she was only about 2 or 3 years older than me at the time.
Right. Okay. So it's not crazy that this friendship that you formed might lean more towards the romantic, or that you're finding solace in each other.
And yeah, and I'm not saying that it was romantic. I'm not saying like I wanted a future with this woman. We both found a bond in each other, if that makes sense. There wasn't a sexual aspect to it. There wasn't anything like that. It just I could tell it felt good on either sides of both of us to be close and be together, which was kind of cool. And then the staff decided one day, they were like, hey, you need to spend less time with Alex. I believe she said something like that. I'm not sure. Again, there wasn't very much communications on both sides, so I'm not sure how that conversation went. But she became very distant very suddenly, which with attachment issues and everything that I went with, it made it hard for me to trust people and to pursue friendships with people there. And I have one person that I still talk to from that program. His name's Ari, and he is amazing. He's like always been there for me and everything. When I moved to Utah, he lives 10 minutes from there, and we're going to hang out all the time.
That's quite a significant thing really as well, because you spent 2 years of your life here, and 2 years is not a small amount of time. And you've left a Yelp review, which you directed me towards. And I actually spent quite a lot of time going through the other reviews that people have left that are all sort of 1-star reviews. There are a couple of 5-star reviews that are left by people who have said that they went to this program being like a waste of space and came out of it a completely reformed person. I mean, that's great to hear that these programs aren't having this type of detrimental effect on every single person that passes through them. And I always like to point out the fact that people will be having pretty much positive experiences in these places, but the amount of people that come forward and say that they suffered abuse and that they suffered coercion and that they still suffer today because of the things that they were put through by force, it's no coincidence that the number of people speaking negatively about the troubled teen industry is significantly higher than the people speaking positively. So, I mean, you can go and see some good 5-star reviews. Some people might suggest that they've been placed there by people that are affiliated with Maple Lake Academy, but we'll never know. Somebody said that some of the 1-star reviews had also been wiped, and that Maple Lake had managed to somehow have some of those 1-star reviews revoked from the Yelp website, which I thought was interesting. But that's kind of difficult if your parents are doing the online research and the due diligence that you mentioned they did. If places like Maple Lake Academy are able to have some of these reviews wiped in the way that somebody has suggested they have had, then where are your parents supposed to get both sides of the story, the whole picture, before they send you to a place like this? That kind of summarizes Maple Lake Academy. But you mentioned that there's one more program after that.
Well, technically there's 2, but the second one is where I'm at right now, and it's not a program; it's a trade school to learn all these amazing trades. Like I'm learning to weld. I have gotten pretty good at automotive repair, and I stay there for about, I want to say, like a year, and then that's the last step in treatment, and then after that I'm free to do whatever I want. 3 months ish, maybe a little bit more or less, I'm going to be moving in with my girlfriend to Utah, and I'm going to be getting an apartment and getting a job and starting my life.
Brilliant. That sounds fantastic. And this program that you're in now, is this something that you decided yourself to enroll onto?
Yeah, that's what I was going to address real quick. Is the last place I was at is where I fell the hardest. It was in Idaho. It was called Milestones, which, if you guys, the viewers of this podcast, are interested, there are a lot of really interesting connections between a cult called Synanon, and that's what it's called, right?
Synanon, yeah, Synanon. So there's connections between Synanon and Milestones. So perhaps the kind of early tough love industry that we now know as the troubled teen industry ties between Synanon and Milestones.
Exactly, and they're crazy ties to. I did hours and hours and hours of research on it, and there's crazy ties to the place that I went. And as she mentioned in her CDU interview, probably these raps or basically group sessions where people get berated and just absolutely treated like crap. Members there this woman had been doing it for 25 years in this industry. She used to work at CDU, and she was just this evil woman. Like, she wanted people to succeed, but she had so much going on in her own life that she would bring people down along the way. And like, she would constantly be telling me, like, you're going to end up in jail, you could become homeless, you could do this, and this, all this stuff. And just throughout my stay, just constant. And all the other staff there were pretty nice. I liked them a lot. My mentor, I was amazing little lady, some great insight. Definitely, yeah, she was amazing. Older lady, just super great, super friendly. And then they had this woman named Jolene who was pretty cool. She was really avid about taking us on trips and going on camping trips and rafting trips and all kinds of stuff. She was very big on searching for the independence. And when I got there, it was the first kind of freedom almost that I had after 2 years. As you can expect, I kind of went on a rampage and I started partying every night. I started doing harder drugs. I eventually dropped out of the program and became homeless for about 2 weeks. And then right after that, I talked to them again and I was like, hey, like, is there any way that I could come back? This woman was like, well, you've kind of made a mockery of my program and everything that I've taught you, all this stuff, while I'm sitting in addiction and despair because I had lost a job that I loved, but there was this guy that was working there. He's just an absolute asshole. I'm not going to go into that because that's not related to what we're talking about. But long story short, I fell into this depression hole. And next thing I know, my parents show up out of nowhere and they say, hey, we found this really cool trade school. I don't think where you're at right now is the place for you. Let's try this other option, because it was either this or jail. With what I was doing, the drugs I was taking, the people I was hanging out with, I was stealing. I had a restraining order against me from my ex-girlfriend. I just was going down a bad path. I didn't know what to do, and I kept falling deeper and deeper into it. And I was like having friends be like, hey, try this cocaine, try this, try that. And I would be like, okay, and I'd try whatever they'd offer me and get deeper and deeper into the hole. And they sent me here where I'm at right now. It's called Wisdom Ranch, if you guys want to look it up. And it's amazing. Like, I cannot say enough good stuff about this place. This trade school I'm at right now, called Wisdom Ranch, it is amazing. Like, it's on a 3,000 acre ranch with close to 300 cattle. You can walk around, you can pretty much do whatever you want as long as you stay on the ranch. And I mean, when I first got there, I was pushing boundaries. I was trying to see where the limit was, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like, I'll still mess around, have fun every once in a while. But
so you went from Maple Lake Academy to Milestones, and Milestones just wasn't working for you. You fell back into some old behaviors, and then your parents came and suggested the trade school, which has just really turned everything around for you.
exactly. And if I had not gone here, I probably would still be homeless, honestly. And I'm like, I have a lot of the skills that I need to succeed in life now through the hard work, the amazing people that I've worked with and that I'm still working with. I learned how to like do all kinds of stuff. Like, I learned how to take apart a giant yurt. I learned how to wire a house. I learned how to build a house. Automotive stuff. I learned how to take care of cows, how to skin a rattlesnake, all kinds of stuff that the average person wouldn't know how to do, but it could be very, very useful in the workforce, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of hands-on skill, like building on skills and really keeping yourself kind of physically busy.
Exactly. And they also touch on the emotional and social, because you're living with 5 or 6 other guys who have issues. They all have their stuff they're going through. And it's that part is all about coexisting peacefully.
Okay, so even though you're enrolled in another program currently, it's really working for you. There's something that you've been able to grab onto here that's just turned everything around.
Yeah, I had a big talk with the boss, because I was just doing stuff. I was sneaking off with girls. I was smoking weed with friends. I was doing all kinds of stuff that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I had a big talk with the boss, and he said, hey, like, when they put me on probation, basically one of the options was either here or jail. And he said, unless you want to go back to jail, I'd try and turn your life around while you're here. And I kind of had a epiphany almost, where I was like, shit, I need to do something if I want a future.
So this person is not saying, you're going to end up in prison, you're going to end up homeless, you're all of these things. He's saying, you might want to think about what you're doing, because there could be some consequences to this, a little less forceful perhaps.
Exactly. And that's the amazing thing about where I'm at now, is there's no force whatsoever, except for they have a few simple rules, which are to keep the community safer, which is like, even if you're 21, no drinking, no smoking pot, no sex, stuff to keep the community stronger, which I get that. And I mean, the only one that I still have issues with, but I don't think there's anything wrong with marijuana. I think that it has a lot of physical and medical benefits, but how I was using it at home is very different from the medicinal use and the way that can actually help people, if that makes sense.
Right. So more sort of abusing substances than using them recreationally, perhaps.
Exactly. And I just feel like I'm doing a lot better. This place has really helped me out. And after a few years of crappy programs, I kind of lost sight of myself, and I thought I was never going to be happy, but I'm actually pretty excited for my future, and I'm pretty happy right now.
Well, that's really great to hear, Alex, considering some of the low points that you've told us about during your experiences in some of these programs. It's reassuring to hear that you're excited about things and that you feel like you yourself are in a good place physically, mentally.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm super excited. Me and my girlfriend are going to go on a road trip in about 3 months on our way to Utah, and we're just going to start our life. It's going to be amazing.
And you said that you first enrolled into Aspiro, you were 16, 17 years old. How old will you be when you finish this last program?
I am currently 21, and I will finish at 21 years old.
Gosh, that's such a significant portion of your life to be spent bouncing around from one program to another. Oh my goodness. I'm not surprised that you are excited just to have some downtime and just to, I mean, does it worry you reintegrating into typical everyday life?
Every day. I'm very worried about not fitting in, not being kind of like falling into bad habits. And there's a bunch of other anxieties that aren't related to what we're talking about today as well. But I definitely have found better ways to manage them than when I was in those other programs as well. And I've grown a lot as a person being here.
It's so great to hear you speak positively about where you are now. And because of the amount of emphasis that's being placed on the troubled teen industry, there are undoubtedly resources that you can access that will help you realign yourself after these experiences. If you're struggling to find your place in typical society, I know that there are places you can access support, other people you can speak to on forums and boards, but also nonprofits that are working with individuals that have had these experiences as well. So there should be a pretty good basis of support if you do find yourself in need of it when you are on your journey into some type of normalcy, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted to bring up that this place that I'm at right now, to the listeners and anyone, it is a good place. It's a place where your kids can feel safe. They can grow and learn stuff that can actually help them out.
In this place you're in now, do you have your phone calls and your letters censored?
No.
Well, there you go. I mean, that red flag doesn't exist. Do you have the chance to kind of go off the property and bring back things with you that you're allowed to keep as your own personal possession?
Yeah. How it works is we get what is called ranch pay off of hard work. We can make up to $200, which that is the only part I'm not that big of a fan of, is the money, but the money's not a huge deal. The bigger deal is taking this time and learning the necessary skills in order to live life, so that when I'm out of it, or anyone who is thinking about applying, anyone that has been here, that they can apply that skill that will help them, and they can find that thing that will help them to make money when they're out.
Transferable skills are definitely important, especially when people often leave their troubled teen programs with no official qualifications. You know, sitting on a mattress for 3 months is not going to help you look for work, I imagine.
Exactly. But like I was explaining to you about outside stuff, we get this money and we get paid once a month, and we can spend that money on anything we want, minus the obvious that I had stated before.
Okay, so a lot of big differences straight away off the mark. You know, just a few simple questions about the restrictions that are placed on individuals within these programs just shows you a big difference straight away.
Another big thing that was the first thing I noticed was when I was at Milestones, they were just really big on no smoking, no drugs, no nothing. I walked into this place. They didn't search me. They didn't do anything. They trusted that I had nothing on me, which I did, which was an amazing start to this place. And the first thing that they did was they said, do you have any vaporization devices, like vapes? Because how are they 100% sure that this new guy doesn't have some sort of drug in his vape? Mess up the community, mess up people's work ethic, mess up everything else. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I definitely made some mistakes while I've been here. I've learned from them. I'm still learning. But the biggest thing that I noticed is they let you smoke cigarettes and like they kind of let you be yourself. And their mentality is, if you're gonna mess up your life, we don't want to control you, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's not good that they're not promoting cigarette smoking, but they're letting you live your life how you want.
So just a lot of differences.
Exactly. And like, let's say you're really stressed out. Like in a lot of the other programs I went to, there were parts where they didn't want me leaving the house. Like if I'm stressed out, I can go for a 10-mile walk if I tell people where I'm going, and like I can walk all day. But yeah, you work from 9 to 4 with a break for lunch, and then we do a lot of stuff. Like a few days ago, we went fishing. I'm thinking about trying to organize a trip to a hot spring today. It's pretty awesome.
It's great to hear you speaking so positively about it. I can hear in your voice that, you know, you're authentically happy about being there, and you genuinely feel like you're in a great place, which must be refreshing not only for yourself but for your family as well.
Oh, definitely. I know my little brother, when I was at Maple Lake, he heard some of the stuff that was happening with me, and he knew that it wasn't the right place for me. And when I came home for this last Christmas, and my little brother he wrapped me in a hug, and he just said, "Man, it's so good to see you doing good."
Wow. Oh, that's so wholesome.
It was amazing. It was like the best feeling in the world. And then my parents and I just spent the whole week together, and it was pretty great. I'm gonna go see them again in about a month. They're gonna come up to Utah and help me pick out an apartment, and then
Oh, I just love it. It sounds just so much better than it was when you first went to Aspiro. I mean, I know that you had to go in sort of like a convoluted way to get to where you are now, perhaps making negative progress. You know,
right.
in Maple Lake Academy, there were points where you might have actually been set back instead of pushed forward. But this place that you're in now sounds absolutely like the right place for you, you know. But some people might benefit from sitting and talking about their feelings and reflecting on things and trying to establish insight. And some people might work better from being in environments where it's hands-on and they're stimulated and they're learning about things and they're building on their skill set and, you know, all of the great things that you're involved in at the moment. And it's just really great to hear you speak positively about this and where you are now in retrospect of everything that you've been through. I think you've expressed insight in the way that you said that you were able to have positive experiences in amongst the negativity, but it's important to highlight the exploitation that has taken place on you personally and that you've witnessed other people go through as well, because there has to be some reform and legal change across these troubled teen programs. There has to be some change. Children are dying in these schools, in these programs. So there has to be some kind of change somewhere. And I know that there are different organizations and nonprofits and people with big platforms that are pushing for this change. But without stories like yours, Alex, we wouldn't know that this change needed to take place in the first place. More people would die. More people would keep sending their children to these programs. And no other kids would even think to speak out if it wasn't for the people coming forward with the stories like you are now, you know, paving the way for people to say, yes, actually, do you know what? I was abused. I was exploited, and we need to do better.
Exactly. And that's part of the reason I wanted to jump on this podcast with you and just kind of talk about all that and talk about the industry and how it's crazy to think about. Now I'm going to diverge off our topic a little bit here, to think about how much money is made off of these programs.
Oh, absolutely. Billions. Yes, absolutely. It's a $1 billion industry.
My parents have spent so much money on me in the last 5-6 years that they could have gone to probably to the UK 3 times over, if not more. And that does stress me out a little bit, because like I don't want to like mess up and F up my relationship with them when they put that much time into me, which kind of brings guilt. But at the same time, it feels good to have my family back.
Which is I think the best takeaway of this episode is that you're in a place now where you have your family and you have your future that you're looking forward to. And yeah, I think that's the perfect thing to end on today, Alex, unless there's anything you wanted to add.
I think we're good. Honestly, this was a good, very productive conversation. Thank you so much, Casey, for taking time to chat with me.
Oh no, thank you, Alex, for finding time to sit down. I know time zones can be tricky, but we've sat down, we've spoken about it. I know that I said to Daphne in my conversation that I was hoping to gain the perspective of somebody that lived in the Mail House, and we've done that today. I think you've given us a really good oversight, a fair oversight. You've talked about the negatives, but also the positives. And I'm just glad that I can end this conversation knowing that you truly feel like you're in a good place. And we've done great things today just by having this conversation and putting it out there to the listeners and to further the efforts of those who are working in the anti-TTI space.
Exactly, Casey. Thank you again for everything. Thank you for this opportunity. I got to get going. I got some stuff I got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, thank you so much for your time. I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Sounds good, ma'am. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye. That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.